officer, do you believe the enforcement action that you took against my client was good police work? Yes or no? Thank you. Now let me ask you this. Under similar circumstances, would you take the same enforcement action regardless who the person was? Yes or no? Thank you. What if instead of my client, it was the prosecutor you saw engaging in the same activity that got my client arrested, handcuffed behind his back, tossed into a jail cell, and prosecuted? Would you arrest, handcuffed behind his back, and toss the prosecutor into a jail cell like you did to my client? Yes or no? What if instead of the prosecutor, it was the judge? Well, let me ask you this, officer. Had it been another police officer who did the same thing to one of your family members, are you going to testify here and now that you'd be okay with that arrest? That you would label that like you did early in your testimony, good police work? Yes or no?
Simply putting on a uniform with an American flag or a badge does not make you a hero, but it does potentially make you a ticking time bomb. And when society engages in uncritical hero worship, those same heroes begin to think they can act with impunity. Do you agree or disagree? Being a curious man, I was wondering, you think maybe there's something written about that in Rise of the Oathbreakers Part 2? You know, the one that's subtitled America's Crisis of Competency in Law Enforcement? You know, the book that nobody buys, right along with Rise of the Oathbreakers Part 1, you know, the other book that nobody buys. Like everything else in life, however, there are exceptions to the general rule. In this case, it is not uncommon to hear the term bootlicker used instead of sheep. It is a less than flattering descriptor of die-hard police defenders, the men and women who are critical not so much of the police, but of those who are critical of the police instead. The uninformed public's role becomes even more troubling by their propensity to overlook or explain away the latest report of bad police behavior. Whoever it was the police beat up or killed most recently must have had it coming. Therefore, anyone who professes to the contrary is espousing anti-police rhetoric. I wrote the book so you wouldn't have to. The work, the heavy lifting, has been done. Call it taking a leap of faith. I can tell you now that if you do take that leap of faith and you put out a little bit of money for the books, you're not going to regret it. And just in case some of you might be wondering, I would never put my name on the bottom of a book cover if I thought that book that I had written was boring. Neither one of the Oathbreakers books are boring. Rise of the Oathbreakers Part 2, and I'm using this as an example, has been out for a little over a year and a half, and sold fewer than 100 copies. Do you know how hard that is as the author to admit, to actually confess to people how few books have been sold? There is zero chance that we're going to win this battle against police tyranny unless we know at least as much about the law as the average police officer knows about the law. But you get done reading the Oathbreakers books, you're going to know so much more about the law than what the average police officer knows about the law. Let me ask you this. Are the police going to reform? Are they going to reform in a way that makes the police better? It's yes or no. Just like those questions at the front of the video. Yes or no. Do you think they're going to reform themselves? If the answer is no, then what do we have to do on the civilian side to try and make the situation more tenable? We have to grow in knowledge. And if we don't grow in knowledge, if we continue to be lumps of clay when it comes to our civil rights and knowing the law, then we're doomed. Because the more people are ignorant, the more control that the police have over us. And the more we're expected to give up our rights by the police. What are we going to do about all the sheep and bootlickers? All the ones who are engaging in hero worship of law enforcement? How are we going to bring them around? I know that's a tougher question than asking what it's going to take to bring the police around. Well, maybe there might be a book or two that are interesting enough that some of these bootlickers and sheep will actually take the time to read and learn so they get to understand once and for all that, I'm just handing my rights over to people who don't give a shit about me, who won't hesitate to use force and violence, not if it serves their best interest. None of this is easy. That's why we call it a battle, and the battle's being waged every second of every day. We have to have the right tools, the right weapons, if you will, if we're going to have any chance of prevailing. You've already picked a side, now it's time to decide. How are you going to contribute your time or maybe your labor or even some of your money to advance the cause of freedom to fight back against police tyranny? It has to be more than posting another pissed off comment below yet another YouTube video. When you see something on YouTube that pisses you off and it's legitimate, well, it's fine to go ahead and call agencies to hold them accountable. I do that. But I do that in addition to writing books and having a channel. I don't do audits. I don't want to do audits. I can't be intimidated as a former officer. Some of you have heard me say that before. All I'd have to do is run into that dipshit cop who thought they were going to abuse their authority with me, and there's a good chance next time you'd see that officer be wearing their own fucking handcuffs on the 10 o'clock news. And I'm not even exaggerating. So I go a different route, because I know better. So what can you do to fight back? You can send someone a copy of the Oathbreakers books. Doesn't have to be both, it can be one, but send someone a book. Share the knowledge. I would call it like a knowledge virus, only a good virus. Share the knowledge virus with somebody else. And when they get done reading the book, you know they're going to like it. And you know they're going to have learned unbelievable amounts of information. What are the chances that book's now going to find its way into the hands of somebody else? And then somebody after them? And see what I mean? You can send one book that changes 10 lives. What the hell are you waiting for? You have a voice. And now you've given someone else a voice. You realize that there is even the possibility that by sharing that book, sharing the information, you might save a life. And there's a better chance that you might prevent a life from being ruined by the police. So again, what are you waiting for?